Good. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Donald. Brilliant. Okay, so without any further ado, I'll pass on to Luke.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks very much. Well, firstly, thanks for having us on. We're really looking forward to the session. And as Steve said, do ask questions as we go. That's absolutely fine. So I'm Luke Williams. I work in our board management services practice area at Barnett Waddingham, and I've been part of the firm-wide general code steering group, focused on sort of risk, governance, secretarial. Those are my main sort of things. And I'm joined by David this morning.
Yeah, morning everyone. So I'm David. I work with Luke in our board management services practice area. Having previously worked in operations management, I've got a keen interest in streamlining processes and driving up efficiencies, which is how I came to play a lead role in the development of BW Core. So yeah, really pleased to join you today to show you what we've developed.
Thanks, David. So we thought it'd be helpful before we take you through BW Core is we just sort of set the scene a little bit around how we got to where we got to. So General Code was published earlier this year that we all know about. Firstly, we did a lot of research and also a lot of discussions with clients, trustees and the like around exactly what they were looking for in relation to kind of General Code, value add and compliance. So we saw it as a really good opportunity to, add value to that governance and risk practices, and also make sure that something was manageable from sort of a business as usual sort of basis. So that's where we kind of focused on. I think key aspects for us were we wanted something and to develop something that would be available and suitable for all, irrespective of scheme size, complexity. And another major point for us was that we didn't want any costs to be prohibitive. So that was in our mindset before we started sort of going out and thinking about how we would develop something. So what were we being sort of told? Most people didn't want something that was a tick box exercise. They also wanted something that you could actually see the value that was going to be added from it. And I think one of the key things that hopefully we've all heard about, so this own risk assessment piece, I think a key aspect there was not wanting that to be a big job at the end when it falls due, and anything that can kind of happen in between to make that easier would be far sort of much appreciated. So one of the things, again, that we wanted to do was making sure anything we developed wasn't onerous. So we wanted to focus essentially on not filling out and completing something, but actually the time should be spent on having those discussions, talking about the important things and focusing on sort of the thoughts, behaviors and active decision making. So where we've got to is we've come up with BW Core. So Core stands for Calendar, Own Risk Assessment, Risk Register, an Effective System of Governance. And I'll hand over to David, who's going to sort of take you through and explain this great product in more detail. So over to you, David, to share. And as we say, please ask questions as we go through. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So the aim of this section is to give you a brief introductory overview of our new BW Core system. As Luke mentioned, we've thought about how oversight can be streamlined to make trustees' lives easier, whilst at the same time helping them to ensure compliance with their new and updated obligations. So this led us to develop BW Core. It runs off a system we've built which consolidates key governance and risk management items. It contains one central list or register of key governance processes, which feeds through directly into each of the 4 items shown on the screen here. So it essentially combines the ongoing review of a scheme's effective system of governance, or ESOG, and risk register with a supporting scheme calendar. It has also been set up in a way which facilitates the streamlined production of an own risk assessment, or ORA, when required, which we'll come back to. The key benefits to this approach are largely cost and time savings. But you can see here some of the other advantages on the screen. So improved integration and oversight, connecting the 4 governance oversight documents through BW Core drives up efficiency and ensures that interdependencies between linked concepts are suitably captured. So everything is considered in the round against the overarching principles of the relevant legislation and general code. Analysis and reporting through BW Core, you can get clear reporting when you need it to help focus priorities and support proportionate and pragmatic decision making. Another benefit is embedding of ESOG and risk management review. So our structured ongoing review cycle through BW Core facilitates joined up and efficient periodic review of interlinking items within each area of risk and governance. Preparation for the aura. Because the ongoing operation of BW Core factors in the aura requirements, production of that formal aura document becomes much less onerous each time it is due. And finally, continuous improvements. Any suitable adjustments or changes to the scheme's processes can be identified and tracked as part of the business as usual reviews through BW Core. And that means that there should be no spikes in workloads because of specific events, for example, that aura report becoming due. This next section covers the key features of BW Core to demonstrate how it works in practice. Apart from an optional actions log, there is just one tab or sheet to maintain within the BW Core system. And this contains all of the governance processes or policies in the grey columns on the left there. The template is pre-populated with these, but we can easily add or remove processes for a scheme as required. The processes are grouped by section as shown in the blue bar on the left. These are based on the structure of the aura requirements, which we have identified as the most suitable structure for BW Core. And all of the sections are shown in the light blue box on this screen here. So on this working sheet, moving across to the right, the ESOG details for each process are shown in the yellow columns. These include whether the process is mandatory, advised, i.e. based on best practice, or flexible. So that means it's the choice of the governing body or trustee based on the requirements of their scheme, as well as the relevant process description and section of the general code. Where a process in the grey columns there is listed specifically for the risk register or calendar, but doesn't form part of the trustee's ESOG, the ESOG details are just left blank. Scrolling further to the right, this tab takes us to the aura details for each process, which we'll come back to. And scrolling again to the right takes us to the risk register. The content of the risk register has been structured in such a way that the risks align with the processes as grouped for the ESOG and aura in the grey columns. So what that means is that the listed processes are also essentially your mitigating controls for the risks logged. And as with those listed processes, the pre-populated risks in the template here can be easily added to or removed based on the requirements of the scheme. So in summary there, everything is kind of aligned and hangs together. Finally, within the BW Core system, there is the functionality to log any agreed actions, specifically in relation to the processes and risks logged, as shown on the screen here. But we appreciate that, many trustee boards have already got suitable arrangements in place for logging and tracking actions generally, for example, through meeting minutes and actions logs, but the functionality is there if desired. Turning to reporting, as I mentioned before, BW Core includes the benefit of clear and concise reporting, which we've designed to try and help really drive engaging and focused discussions at trustee meetings. And one of the key reports is this governance update, which is intended for use at quarterly trustee meetings, but it can be produced at any time. The update includes a risk governance dashboard as shown on the screen here. And this draws out key aspects of the risk register component, including the risks with the highest severity score set by the trustee board. So that's all of your risks with a red rating, as you can see at the top of the screen there. Any risks over the tolerance set by trustees. So this is where the trustee board has set what it deems to be an acceptable level of risk, and the risk logged exceeds that threshold in terms of severity. And finally, any risks that appear to be increasing in severity based on the latest change to the score set by the trustee board. So that's really drawing out any trends that are going on there with the risk management piece. Under our proposed quarterly review cycle, these aspects of the risk register are reviewed every time. And in addition, the risk and control wording for a specific section of the risk register is reviewed, as shown towards the bottom of the screen here. So, for example, one quarter will focus on funding and investment, another quarter might focus on administration and payment of benefits, and so on. The dashboard also includes a summary tracking the scheme's ESOG from an ORA perspective. As I say, we'll come back to the ORA later, but one benefit to highlight here is that the ORA can be operated on an ongoing basis through BW Core and through the same rolling review cycle as the risk register. So what that means, for example, is that if the trustee board is reviewing the funding and investment section of the risk register one quarter, they will also review their processes in that area from an ORA perspective in the same quarter. And finally, within the governance update, there is a summary of the risk register, which is just for ease of reference, really, as well as a copy of the scheme calendar. The scheme calendar is fully automated based on the processes logged within BW Core and their review dates and cycles. So in summary, the governance update provides a high-level overview of the key aspects and complements our suggested structure for the ongoing operation of the scheme's risk and governance oversight. Depending on where you are within your ESOG journey, you can undertake an initial gap analysis within BW Core to identify how the trustee board's current policies and procedures stand against the requirements and the starting point from which to enhance its setup. If you record the initial analysis in BW Core, that has the benefit that it then facilitates a seamless transition into the ongoing ORA, as you already have everything recorded in one place there. However, it is possible to operate the ORA within BW Core without completing this initial analysis within the system. So I mentioned the ORA a few times on earlier slides, but just turning to the ORA in more detail here. BW Core provides a template structure in which you can set up your ORA and operate it on an ongoing basis. The ORA starts with a scheme profile given the proportionality aspect. This includes some relatively basic information about the scheme, which isn't expected to change much over time, but this will form part of the ORA considerations and it will be included within the ORA report that we've prepared. So regarding how the ORA operates within BW Core, each governance section has suggested success criteria detailed in the template, as shown at the top of the screen here, against which the listed processes can be assessed. So in the section shown on the screen here, which covers policies for the governing body, i.e. the trustee board, the success criteria for the governing body policies states that each policy reflects the current circumstances of the scheme, has a clear aim without the need to read the full document, is written concisely using as little technical language as possible and defines any jargon, accurately reflects the steps that the governing body would take in practice, clearly defines the roles and responsibilities for all parties, and so on. A rating is then given to each process or policy to reflect the extent to which it meets that success criteria, and those ratings are shown on the right of the screen here. Once the rating for each process has been agreed by the trustee board, it's then selected against the process on a single worksheet of the template and feeds into the automated reporting. And as mentioned earlier, the intention is that processes will be reviewed on a rolling basis, taking a section of governance at a time. Whilst processes rated as requiring action early in the ongoing assessments might reasonably be expected to be updated and meet the success criteria by the time the ORA report is due, shifting circumstances outside of the trustee board's control might mean that further action is required further down the line, and it might therefore be reasonable for some specific actions to be outstanding at the time that the ORA report is produced. Once the triennial ORA is due, we have written a short Word document to which the latest ORA results from BW Core can be appended, thereby completing the requirement with relative ease at the end of the ORA period. And that completes the overview. If you have any questions or would like me to go through any particular aspects of the system again, please do let us know either now or following this session.
Okay, David. Luke, do you want to sort of give a sort of a summary of that? And one thing that comes to mind is who's going to use it ultimately, who's going to do it on the bread and butter day-to-day side of things, cost, return on investment. I think trustees and sponsors all ask the same. So yeah, we're sort of halfway there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. And thanks, David. So I think I'll start with the feedback. So the feedback so far has been having everything in one place, where it's one particular risk and processes log to update, has made it far more efficient for the clients that are currently using it. I think having reporting at your fingertips as well is something that everybody wants, whether it's for quarterly meetings or whether it's at any period of time. So that's been really well received. In terms of costs, it will depend how each client uses the system. So it could be how often do you want the reporting, who's actually going to be monitoring and managing the system on a sort of daily basis as part of business as usual activity. We designed this product really to combine with our consulting. So that was the way it was designed. So in essence, we would be working with the trustees, the client, with their governance processes and any gaps from their effective system of governance and analysis in that sense. That being said, there is no reason why it couldn't be used as a standalone product if that was preferred. Say, for example, it could well be an in-house pensions manager or pensions team that may wish to adopt this on an ongoing basis. So I think that was, again, one of the things at the forefront is we wanted to make sure that it included everyone really, and that it would be beneficial for everybody. So that's sort of where we've got to. Very happy to take any questions.
Well, I was going to ask Bobby, maybe Bobby would be a good starting point because he's very hot on governance and he's a trustee, obviously. But there's a lot of stuff in there on governance, Bobby. What's your initial reaction, Bobby? And have you got any questions, I guess? And then I've got some questions, but we'll come back to that. Bobby?
Yeah, so two questions, really, both on proportionality. So how does it build in proportionality? So say for a small scheme that's only, say, putting in specific extra actions for, say, half of their policies, because the other half are business as usual, and you don't really want to put bells and whistles around stuff which is doing a really good governance job already. Then secondly, more specific on proportionality, what about schemes that don't meet 4 times a year? How does that build it in, or is it hard coded that you have to review it 4 times a year?
Did you want to start,
yes,
David? Or do you want me
yes, I can take those. Yeah, okay. So with regards to proportionality, in the own risk assessment report, we have built it so that it starts off with some basic details about the scheme to help kind of hone in on that proportionality aspect. And then within the BW core system itself, we have built it so that you can tailor the content for your scheme. So it's quite easy to add or remove some of the pre-populated controls and processes within the system. Part of the reason we put those yellow control columns in with the ESOG requirements is that's a way of being able to identify what is like a must for your scheme, so what you have to have for every scheme, and what's a little bit more flexible. So for a larger, more complex scheme, for example, you might have more content in there, which is kind of that flexible rated policies and procedures where they're just put in really for your scheme. So I guess for a smaller scheme looking to do like a lighter touch governance piece, you'd only really have the musts, like the essentials that are marked up within the template. And regarding schemes that don't meet 4 times a year, again, that review cycle that we've kind of proposed within the template can be very easily tailored. So where we've kind of taken a section of the BW core system for a review each quarter, you could easily consolidate that to kind of 2 sections twice a year, if that makes sense. And then also that governance report that we've built within the system, although it is intended to be produced quarterly, it can actually be produced at any time with ease. So again, if your trustee board meets twice a year, it would work really well in that scenario too.
I think just to add to the proportionate pieces, if your data is all on there and it's available, it gives you the opportunity to make the active decision making piece around not doing something rather than not knowing you don't have a policy or something doesn't exist. So it gives you all of that kind of upfront info that then if you don't want the bells and whistles and you don't think you need to do more, you've actively decided that from the information that you've got.
Okay, and then how about the other side? So multiple schemes, so either an employer who's got multiple schemes or a trustee firm like us that's got multiple schemes to sort of do a risk assessment over the top to make sure that all our schemes are compliant.
So that's interesting. I mean, it is designed on a per scheme basis at the moment in terms of to work with individual schemes. But do you mean more in terms of if you wanted to look holistically across?
Yeah, so an employer who's got more than one scheme might want to look holistically across, and a trustee firm that's got multiple schemes might want to look holistically across.
Sure. So I guess the way that I would see that working would be probably from the reporting and the dashboard that you could run at any period. That would give you an idea of, you know, high level stats, high level risks, what's outstanding. So I would see that would be your initial starting point to look across the board on that basis, and that could be sort of run at any specific time. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, David, but that's how I would kind of envisage it working, would be on that basis.
Yeah, I think that's the way I'd see it working. Yeah, I mean, you could combine that governance update report into like sections, so one for each scheme. But I guess you've got the commonality there, like everything would look the same across the schemes in terms of reporting.
Yeah, so they're just initial, a bit more detailed questions. It looks pretty good to me, the system, first look at it.
Thank you.
Luke, can I ask a question about, it looks very DB centric, let me put it that way. Can you expand a bit on if you've got DC sections, if you've got AVCs, and also the third question would be, would it also work for the governance board of a master trust, for example, which is very DC centric rather than DB centric? Is there a DC master trust version, or are you building one? 3 questions, sorry, so many.
No, all really good questions. And so the focus initially was around compliance and adding value, and it was looking at, you know, DB, occupational pension schemes, looking at the code. But we are having discussions with lots of different schemes. For example, LGPS have been interested around this, and they have slightly different requirements. And the way that it's been designed is it can be bespoke and it can be changed. So the answer is yes, that's all being looked at, and there is more to come. So it wouldn't be just specific for a certain arena, as it could be adapted and it could be bespoke for whatever the requirements might be, and whether that's slightly different in whatever scenario, then yes, it's flexible and it can be adapted.
Okay. Cool. And in terms of the changes, what one thing that worries me a little bit, and probably worries you, is this is your piece of kit, is, you know, regulations change, you know, consultations come out, you know, regulations change, rules change. So there's 2. There's governmental change or regulations, which applies to every scheme. Is there like a master program which changes that, or the trustees decide to amend a rule? Or amend something which might impact governance, or might change their SIP, for example. Is that all built in or baked in, I should say? Is that sort of flexible enough to deal with all those changes?
We do have a process, internally for like any legislation changes or regulatory requirements, which may shift over time. So at least once a year, we'll conduct like a technical review of the raw template, and then circulate to our consultants any changes for them to then discuss with their clients on how that feeds into their own scheme's copy of BW Core. Regarding any changes made by the trustee board, that's kind of done entirely at scheme level, so you've got full flexibility there within the system to make changes to reflect anything that gets adjusted over time at scheme level.
Okay, cool. Sorry, Luke, go on, you were saying?
No, it's fine. I was going to say it is an internal product. So if changes need to happen, they can. We're not kind of reliant upon somebody else doing that. And your point around the master master list is a good one. But I guess what we considered was actually each scheme will begin with core, but it will become bespoke over time to what they want to use it for. So the risks might be one scheme has 70 risks and one might have 50, for example. So if you did a top level new risk and populated it, it wouldn't quite work in that regard. So it'd have to be considered, like David said, at kind of scheme level. But certainly there would be the sort of controls to have a look at any new legislation and anything new coming down the line. So any scenarios like that would definitely be managed.
There may be some changes tomorrow, Luke. You never know. We haven't got onto the budget yet, but maybe that will come shortly. But there you go. Okay, and just to hammer home the point, you did say earlier about standalone. I mean, are we saying that if you've got a capita administrator with an XPS actuary, the BW Core can plug into that because it's a trustee level product? I mean that you're not. I mean, you can sell this as a standalone bespoke product, even when competitors are already the support providers. Is that, and if they are, how does your system then speak to them? And are you getting pushback, or are you getting acceptance of that, or how is that panning out for you?
Yeah, so really good point. So actually, what we have seen mainly in the round is that actually, where people are interested in it, they do want us to work with them on it. So being totally upfront, this was designed as something to support our consultancy offering and our governance approach to code compliance and adding value. In terms of the competitor piece, yeah, that would be interesting. We haven't really seen a competitor say, yes, we want to purchase this and use it. I think where we've more likely seen it is lots of in-house teams and pension managers be more interested around, could they manage it on a daily basis and as business as usual activity, and kind of have us on the phone if they need anything in terms of how do I update this, how do I use it, how do I run the reporting kind of thing. So it's a good point with the competitor one. We haven't had anyone approach us in that way as yet, but yeah, I think from a standalone point, probably seeing more the in-house side of things be more interested in that. And I guess that's maybe down to we're not the only people in the market that have put something out there in relation to code compliance and things like that. So I suspect it's probably they have their own version of a product, just with variances and differences. So that's probably what we're seeing more at the moment. And if you've got anything to add to that, David.
No, I think you've covered everything I would have said.
Okay, cool. So in terms of other opportunities, I suppose how are you selling this? So obviously you're selling this to existing clients. I get that, and obviously new client pitches. But is this you're basically going direct as well? Is this the sort of thing? I mean, I know we've got quite a few trustees and a few sort of introducers, I guess, on this call. But is it a direct sort of marketing plan, or is it we'll take any business from anybody? Or I mean, Barry Mack, you're Muse obviously, and what's your thoughts, Barry? I mean, do you see this as something which is a door opener for you, and or necessity that can really help your case to help schemes review their governance process? Sorry,
Well, it looks,
Barry, go on.
yeah, it looks good, first of all. So that's good. Obviously, we would be one of those competitors that you were referring to, Steve. But I think our interest would be, if a client's already using this, and they want, say, strategic governance advice from us, we'd be interested in, how we would dovetail with that. I'm also interested in what client feedback you've had already in its use. So.
Sure. Yeah, happy to pick up the client feedback so far. So I think it's made people's lives easier. There is that little bit of upfront work to do in terms of if you're doing your ESOP gap analysis, but that would need to be done anyway. But once you're up and running on it, I think from a business as usual activity, just having in essence the scheme calendar and the risk register together, where you can assess your governance and risk processes, has made it far easier for clients rather than update one and then you're updating something else and it's looked at in isolation. It's looking at it all together in the round. And I think that's been the main key benefit, is actually once it's up and running and you're utilizing it and you can get your dashboard update out, what we're finding is the client spending more time discussing the output of the report rather than wasting time filling out this sheet over here and doing this over there. So it's actually helping with the kind of thought piece and the active discussions, which are really important. So that's been the benefits. I think the reporting at any point as well, if the sponsor said, well, show me what's going on here, and it can kind of you can pull that dashboard out. And then I guess the own risk assessment piece is making sure that isn't a big job, in 2026 or whenever it's due. You're actually already doing it on an ongoing basis and can see the improvements as you go. That then makes that reporting piece at the end far more straightforward. And you can focus on actually, yes, where you've been and where you've come from, but actually what the actions and forward-thinking actions are moving forward from that date. David, did you have anything to?
Yeah, just to add, really, that the initial client feedback has been, like you said, really very positive. I think a lot of clients really appreciate that we've got that very clear structure and approach to the Aura, and they can see how the Aura reporting will look from the system. It kind of gives you a nice solution to that. And then also visually, things like the dashboard, a lot of clients say they really appreciate that. Especially in terms of like driving discussion at trustee meetings and just making it a little bit more engaging. You can put it up onto the screen and kind of talk through specific bits of it. If you're quite a visual person like me, it really does help to kind of see it there on the screen as opposed to just talking it through.
Great. Okay, thanks for that. I've got a question. I've got my hand raised, as you can see. I think Derek Scott's typing as well. I don't know what Derek's going to say, but we might ask Derek to unmute and just ask the question. They'll make the point, Derek. Derek, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? It's very sunny where you are. I'm very jealous. So, yeah, okay. Well, you continue typing, or you can unmute, Derek. What do you want to do? He's typing, right? Okay. My question then, I'm going to take my hand down. My question is to do with the regulator. So, did you go and see the regulator before you did this? Did you go and see them when you launched it, or have you had them cast a sort of a keen eye all over it? And do they like it? Did you get good feedback, bad feedback? Surely it's not perfect. So, and also, where did? Oh, Luke, obviously it is perfect. So, but what was their feedback, and are there any gaps, and what do you need to do just to keep them happy, I guess?
I can take that one, Luke, if you like. So we haven't actually shown the regulator the BW Core template as such, but the BW Core system was developed from our internal general code steering group, and they did have contact with the regulator in terms of kind of understanding the requirements and how to apply them. So we did have liaison with the regulator in that respect. But yeah, we've not actually shown them the kind of finished system, really.
Okay, Yeah, oh, it's an honest answer, David, I guess. I suppose it's waiting for a client to present a report, and then the regulator says, "What is this, and where did this come from?" But it's just I'm just thinking, blue sky sort of thing. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe they will accept it. Maybe if the steering group has got their finger on the pulse, which all steering groups have, then you'll be fine. I'm just trying to manage risk, I guess.
Totally understand. I guess the part with the regulator is there is no kind of templates, and they weren't wanting to provide sort of a template so that it doesn't become a tick box exercise. And so I think maybe we should run it past the regulator and see what they think. We have been in sort of dialogue and liaison with them. I guess the biggest thing here is it is the evidence and what you've got, but if it's supporting those active decision-making pieces, and actually people can identify, do we have a valid process or policy in place? Yes or no. Do we actually need to do something about that? Yes or no. And what are the priority orders of when we should do that, linking into the understanding of the code and what are musts, what are shoulds, what are nice to haves, and all of those kind of things. I think looking at it from that basis, no surprise that most clients flagged up as red because they didn't have a remuneration policy, for example. New requirement, something for them to look at sort of straight away. Helps you kind of factor and focus on this one might actually be an amber rating, but it's a quick win because it will take us an hour. Someone hasn't looked at the IDRP for 4 years and the contact details are are out of date. So I think it's encouraging all the right behaviours and the right kind of sort of looking forward approach. So yeah, hopefully that answers it for you. Okay. Sorry, I did see Derek's comment coming as well.
No, we'll come back to Derek. Let's do Bobby first, then we'll come to Derek's comment, and then go on, Bobby. You unmute and ask your question, and then we'll come to Derek's comment.
Yeah, so my basic comment on that. So my experience with the regulator, they don't like marking things like this. What they tend to do is review. So basically what they've done with the TCFD implementation statements, ESG and SIPs, etc. They put a question in the scheme return to make sure you've actually done it, and then they tend to do an annual review. So the first review of the TCFD reports was just an overall review. They didn't really tell schemes what they were or weren't doing wrong. They just gave some guidance. The second review, they've been a bit more forceful, and they say, well, actually, some of these reports definitely need to change. And they were definitely very critical of implementation statements and ESG strategies, which they reviewed very recently. And more recently, they're tending now to use AI to go through all the reports. So I expect that these will all be AI tested when the first ones are being produced.
That's sort of interesting, because that's sort of one of the questions I was going to ask was, if I was a trustee, I'd just go, oh, can you give me a template for governance with IDRP, SIP, ESOG, blah blah blah, wherever it is. How far down the road does AI go? Have you tried it? Actually, that's a really interesting question. Have you tried it? Obviously Bobby has, but have you tried it? I mean, because like it or not, AI automation, or whatever you're going to call it, is coming, and is that going to overtake what you've built, or do you think you would then start embedding automation and AI into your kit, Luke? What do you think? Good question, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, no, all very good questions. And yeah, no, I think you're right. AI is here to stay. It's how best to utilize it. But I guess the considerations at the moment that I think everybody's going through is probably more around yes, how best can you use it, but equally, how best can you ensure and make sure that you're safeguarding your information and your data and anything like that. So is it something that could come in the future? Quite possibly, yes. Have we built anything within core from AI? No, is the answer. Could it come in the future? Could it be utilized well? Yes, but again, with that caveat of, I think it's making sure that everything's safeguarded first. So it's really understanding what benefits can come from it, but equally making sure that that data and any kind of things like that are secure. So yeah, so I think it's probably something for the future that isn't yet on our kind of steering group radar, but never say never in terms of how it could be utilized.
Yeah, okay. I think Derek's point, you've probably read it now, by the way, Luke. What do you think of Derek's point? I mean, is it a case that sometimes nowadays you can go, oh, well, the technology will look after that. If it's all green, then we don't have to worry. But what I think Derek's saying is, well, when you've got a table full of trustees, is there a risk that BAU decisions are affected because your focus is on your template and your governance and your stewardship, and naturally the real issues are diluted? That might be a harsh word, but do you see? I think I see what Derek's saying. Is that what you're saying, Derek? Thumbs up, Derek. Yes, is that what you're saying?
Talk to you. I mean, I'm glad I've retired as a trustee, because I would hate to sit in meetings that are so regimented by technology. It's just, I listened to what David and Luke said, and obviously the flexibility is there. You can be as bespoke as you wish to be, but the reality is people aren't bespoke. They get something like this and they just, that's fine. It fits all the boxes, and it is box ticking. So, it puts a lot of onus on the chair of trustees or chair of committees to do a better job about teasing out what the real issues actually are. And, there's other colleagues on this thing this morning who've certainly blog commented to this extent. There's a concern that professional trustees are really just the regulators inside us to lead things a different way. I mean, I'd much rather Barnett Waddingham had said, well, there's a general code, but we're not going to start there. We're going to start somewhere else and use the regulator as a sort of something you've got to sort of compare against, but don't make the regulations and the general code the structure for your meetings or anything else. As I say, I'm just glad I'm retired and I don't have to face this anymore. But it's not the way I would chair meetings or even participate in other people's meetings. I would say, well, thank you very much. I'll go somewhere else where technology is not doing this to us all.
I mean, I take your point. It is a risk
I worry about lay trustees who just become, they glaze over with this kind of stuff. Whereas if you have a very unstructured meeting, it's much easier to bring lay trustees into the discussion, ask them to ask the simple questions and things like that. This technology is not going to help them, I don't think, but I could be wrong.
I mean, it is a risk we considered, like taking away from the decision-making process. But I think a key point with the BW core system is it's really more just tracking what you're doing as opposed to any kind of actual decision-making. Like there's no outputs from the system in the sense that it's kind of giving you a steer on any decisions you make with your governance arrangements. It's more just kind of complementing the requirements of the general code and legislation and enabling you to make sure that you are complying with the various regulations through like decision making and what have you, but it's not really intended to help actually drive the decisions, if that makes sense. But yeah, we take your point.
No, absolutely. I think the idea of this is as a support mechanism, and that actually encourages the discussion around the important things, but it means you've got an awareness of where everything is. So, and it should be linked to what your priorities are, what your short, medium and long-term objectives are, because that will help you frame the discussions around where the scheme's going, what you're trying to achieve. You may well identify in the gap analysis that your member nominated trustee policy hasn't been updated for a couple of years or whatever, or you don't have one. But it might be that the next election or selection process isn't for 3 years. So you now know that, and you can actually say, we're not going to treat that as a priority within the next 6 months, but we know that we will need to look at that before the next process. Actually, far more important to us is our admin data. We really need to look at cleansing that, and that's a priority with where we're heading. So I really do want to emphasize it's not about the system telling you the answer. It's about giving you the awareness of where everything is. Do you even have it? And then you can have those really important discussions. So it should help facilitate discussions, definitely not replace them.
Okay. Derek's got his hand raised again, but I know Peter's had his hand raised. Let's go to Peter first. Peter, can you unmute Peter and make your point? I know you're involved with the scheme.
Yes. Good morning, and thank you very much for the presentation. We're Barnett Wadding clients. We also have a valuation date of 31st of March 2024. So we're one of the first who have to submit to the ORAs. We also have a trustee board that, well, the company is effectively activity is designing and reviewing and assessing quality assurance systems. So on the trustee board, we have 3 trustees who are lay trustees in pension terms, who are insured with quality assurance systems. One of them has volunteered to drive and has already done the gap analysis on the ESOG. The system is, with a view to doing the ORA in due course. The thing that came out of that is just how bureaucratic the general code is and how irrelevant it is in many respects to the real risk of the scheme. And so as chair of the trustees, I have to sort of say, look, we have to do this. It is a bureaucratic process, but it is not adding any value to the trustee board and the scheme. Please tell me what you think is adding value, and we go and do the things that are important to us, which at the present time is discussions with the employer about scheme surpluses and that sort of thing. So how we deal with that long term, which is not really envisaged within the code, to be honest, because it's the pensions regulator is coming purely from scheme deficit point of view. We have those sort of issues. So I'm just a little bit concerned about, I was really emphasising Derek's point about becoming bureaucratic and focusing attention on the wrong issues. And I take your point that you put it up and you say, right, this is there, that you go away and now identify and you can put in new things to it. But I tend to think that when it comes, we have a calendar system with that comes up at the end of the trustees meeting with the things that can be addressed in the next quarter or whatever. And so we do that process, but as an afterthought, not as a driver, if you like. So I think we just have to be a little bit careful about taking the general code as the starting point, and I think that's yes, I'm just worried about that. I wonder if you have any comments on that. Sorry, it's a bit of a ramble.
Yeah, I just had a couple of immediate thoughts. I mean, yeah, I take your points. I suppose one of the things with some of these governance items and the whole purpose of documenting it is that, although it might not feel like it's adding much value at the time, I guess it's like when there's a scenario unfolds where it does come into play, I think that's where it really does add value. I've spoken to a few trustee boards about this, and it's surprising how many times you can speak to one trustee and they've got a very clear idea of how something would work in a particular scenario, like an emergency, for example, and then you speak to another trustee on the same board and they've got a completely different view of how things would play out in practice. So it's about that, being able to have like that reference point to make sure everyone's on the same page. And also, I guess another point from the general code is that it's about being able to demonstrate that you have these things in place. So if the regulator was to come knocking, how would you be able to demonstrate that you've got these robust processes in place if they're not kind of documented? But I agree, it definitely shouldn't take away from like the main issues facing a scheme and like the biggest risks. So yeah, I take your point.
I think if anything, and thanks Peter, it was helpful comments. I think I agree, the general code shouldn't be your starting point. You'll be discussing where the scheme's heading, what are the immediate objectives, what are the longer term objectives. If anything, this should help identify any risks that mean you won't get there, and how do you then manage those risks and mitigate them to ensure that you do get there. And so it should be supportive in your discussions around where you're heading and what you want to do and what your priorities are. It certainly shouldn't be the starting point. It should be everything else that goes on. But to David's point, it does really help from a demonstrating point that you've got everything under control, or even if something is red, you know it's red, and it's what will you do about it and when. So totally take your point. It should definitely not take away from having those important discussions. That really should be happening all the time, definitely.
Okay, thanks, Peter, for your question. Derek, let's come back to you.
Just to come back a little bit, I wish consultants would talk a bit braver. You know, you talked about a policy on MNTs. You've talked about a remuneration policy, which I know is a new thing, but it's not a big deal. Most of the schemes I ran, the registrar would have the regulator as an amber risk. That's a challenging thing for consultants to admit that the regulator is a risk, but you seem to start at the regulator rather than, to me, the regulator is an external thing you have to manage in certain ways, and that's why I would put it quite high on the risk register. Not the highest risk, but certainly one. But I do think you've got to focus on the big issues and schemes, which in my view tend to be funding, investment, covenant, whatever. That's what you should be spending your time on. And not doing it in a formulaic way, but perhaps through the course of a year's meetings, having some way of possibly meeting every investment manager once for an in-depth discussion, not a quick and dirty looking market relative numbers, but doing these things in a much more constructive way. And I just don't think these templates help. I've said enough. Thank you.
There you go. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it. Bobby, do you want to? We got a few minutes left, but Bobby, do you want to ask a question or make a point?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Derek, because one of the things that frustrated me when I came out of consultant was people telling me they had to do it this way because the regulation said such, which is one of the reasons why I'm setting as a trustee group next week, which is specifically on ESG and climate change, which is trying to get ahead of the regulations and try to change the regulations. But it's already been asked to this group, should we look at other stuff? And it's definitely the intention, my intention, and hopefully the intention of the people who come on the group, that we are going to start being the voice of trying to get some of this stuff reviewed and changed. The FCA, for example, started off with rules-based regulation and eventually went principles-based. It should be principles-based. I'm all for the ESOGs thing coming in and rooting out all the policies and getting everything up to date and making sure everyone's on the same page. But then reviewing that every single year till the scheme's finish just seems over the top. And TCFD, for example, has brought everyone to a certain point. It's got ESG highlighted, but TCFD plus TNFD, no, too much. So we do need to be speaking about this. And Derek, it might not be the consultants, it might be the trustees, and certainly I'm taking that baton into the trustee world at the moment to make sure we speak up about some of these things and try and get ahead of the regulations and go and tell the regulator when it's not working or it's not adding value. We should have the freedom to go to the regulator and say what you just said, Peter. I've just done this ESEG process, I've just done the gap analysis, and it's added no value to my scheme. And I'm saying that as chair of trustees. So we should all have the freedom to be able to say that, and we should all have the braveness to go out and do it. I think that's our job, really.
Okay, excellent. All right. I mean, Luke and David.
Okay,
I mean, it's not
come
all
back
your
to
fault.
that, Bobby. If I
Go,
could
Peter.
just come back to Bobby's point on that. Actually, in our scheme accounts this year, which will be going with the actuarial valuation to the regulator, I have explained how much the regulator has created the problems we currently have. In that it is that's to do with funding. That's a second issue. And I have to explain to the company that they've been forced to take this approach purely because the regulator has applied an unthinking approach to all schemes, and not looked at the individual characteristics of a particular scheme. Anyway, that's the end of my rant. Thank you.
Okay, and we don't have a perfect regulator, and I'm very happy to say that and be recorded to say we don't have a perfect regulator. So there you go. Right, we've got 2 minutes left. Luke, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Budget tomorrow. Pensions professional. You got clients on this call. You got trustees on this call. You are Barnett Waddingham. What is Barnett Waddingham saying to all and sundry about tomorrow's budget? What are you saying?
I can't talk for Barnett Waddingham, but in my personal opinion, I will just say anything can happen. Let's leave it at that.
You're probably not far wrong there, to be fair, are you? Probably not far wrong. So brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Okay, David, have you got okay, let's take Barnett Waddingham out. David, have you got a personal opinion on budgets, or are you particularly worried about one particular thing or two particular things, or?
No, not particularly, to be honest. Like Luke said, I suppose anything can happen, so just wait and see, really. But yeah, I won't be looking out for anything in particular, to be honest. Any specific.
There's a lot of saber rattling going on. I know Podrig's on this call, and I'm sure he won't say anything because he's very well connected and a very well respected journalist, so he probably won't say anything, but that's fine. Listen, Luke, David, thank you very much indeed for your time today, for your presentation and your pitch. We really wish you well with BW Core. Hopefully some of those questions have been useful, some of that feedback's been useful, and I really appreciate everybody's input because to get things right, sometimes you've got to do things wrong. So lots of clapping from Peter. Thank you, Peter, for virtual clapping. I really really appreciate your time today, and the video will be up later on this afternoon with the podcast, so absolutely fantastic. If anybody wants the slides, I'm assuming Luke or David, you're happy to share the slides. So if anybody wants to,
absolutely, yeah,
if anybody wants the slides, also then email me or Henry Tapper, and we will give you the slides. And thank you, Luke, and thank you, David, for your input and your time. It does genuinely look a good product and is innovative, and I wish you lots of success with it. So well done you.
Thanks very much for having us. Yes,
well, thank you very much. Next week, I think we've got in conversation with Ian McKnight, who some of you may know, CIO of or ex-CIO of the Royal Mail, but we'll leave that one to Henry. But so please join us next week. As we usually say, let's pray for peace in the East and peace in the Middle East, and let's see what happens in the budget, which could be anything goes, according to Luke and David. So there you go. Thanks everyone for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for joining. All right, take care.
Everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.